If you're looking to distribute your indie film, you probably heard terms like TVOD and AVOD and SVOD and exclusive and non-exclusive and international rights and physical media and theatrical rights and just all these terms and terminology, and you're like, I have no idea what the heck anybody's talking about. Well, that's what you have me for, because I'm going to explain it all to you here today. In this video, we're going to go over the basics of distribution as far as like what kind of distribution rights that you can sell off to a distributor, or self-distributing as well. So this should give you some basic knowledge about the terminology that you may run into when trying to distribute your indie feature film. Now, full disclosure, this is part of a longer video that I put out recently about indie film distribution. I decided to cut these into more manageable bits as well, so that way if you're like, I can't watch a 2-hour video, here's a shorter abridged version, so that way you have something to refer back to later. So this will be just part one. I don't know how many parts this is going to be, but I'm going to break these into smaller bite-sized videos to make them a little bit more easier to digest. So let's go ahead and get into some common misconceptions as far as indie film distribution and what distribution means as a whole. If my film is good enough, distributors will come to me. That's definitely not always the case. There's so many different films in the world now. Like, one of the great things about technology in the world we live in today is that making a film is so much easier than it was, 10, 20, 30 years ago. But that also means a lot more people are making more films, and distributors are getting a lot pickier. So just because, you can make a very great film and it can get overlooked by distributors. Self-distribution is only for failed films. This is definitely something that, my whole channel is about, ownership and owning your rights and all of that. And actually a great example of this of a movie that just came out is Sinners. So now we're starting to see this in Hollywood now too, right? So, if you have to go the self-distribution route, you definitely shouldn't feel like a failure. Honestly, I think it's the bolder route to go these days, because you're that person that wants to, do everything, retain their rights. And, I obviously love that. It's very important to me as a filmmaker myself. I need Netflix to succeed. This is definitely not true either. One of the great things about, streaming these days is that there's so many different platforms. And honestly, you don't know where you're going to find your home. You might be gung-ho on one specific streaming platform, like Tubi's a very hot one right now. Well, you may find that you'll find another home on, something else. I don't know what that is, and I don't want to give examples right now, but you just don't know where you're going to succeed. So that's why it's great to kind of diversify and just get on as many platforms as possible. So let's get into the basics. What is film distribution, right? So simply put, distribution is how your film gets from your hard drive to in front of an audience, right? This can be in theaters, on a TV, through a streaming platform, or direct sales. So it's important for you to know that there are 5 primary types of distribution rights that you're going to want to get familiar with. And a lot of these are going to seem pretty easy to you, but you could absolutely sell each of these off depending on, whoever you're working with. But you have your theatrical rights, so showing it in movie theaters, for an example, that's a whole set of rights. You have your TV and cable rights, so showing it, just like on a cable channel, a network will buy the rights to air your film. You have your streaming rights, which we're going to get into the different types of revenue models there, but you have, like Netflix and Hulu, and then Amazon and iTunes and all of that. Obviously, you have your international rights. So all of these different rights could apply to, foreign markets too, like the theatrical, streaming, cable, and physical media. Like, you're going to primarily sell these to a domestic market, but you could absolutely, sell off those version of those rights to international markets too. And it can even get down to the regional markets too. It gets really crazy. And then you have your physical media, your DVDs, your Blu-rays, collector's editions, etc. So for an example, my film is on Film Hub right now. I have sold off the domestic rights for streaming, and I'm not sure about cable, but as far as I know, I still have the theatrical rights, so I can still show my movie in theaters because they're not, showing any films in theaters via Film Hub, and physical media. So I can sell Blu-rays, DVDs, all of that. So they primarily just have the streaming rights, and I gave them worldwide rights, which we'll get more into here in a second, but streaming through international markets too. So there's kind of a real world example of what I was just kind of talking about. And then you have what's called exclusive and non-exclusive rights. So what's the difference? When signing a distribution deal, you're often going to need to decide between exclusive and non-exclusive rights. And this determines whether the distributor has sole control over the film's distribution in a specific territory, or if you can work with multiple distributors. So for an example, with Film Hub, it's supposed to be non-exclusive. So if they don't offer a particular platform, they say if they offer a platform that you can't go off and distribute with another distributor on your own, at least to my understanding. I haven't looked enough into the contract to see if I could, if I'm not, well, I'm on Amazon, right? And I got on Amazon before I got on Film Hub. They've kind of changed things at this point, but because of the non-exclusive deal, I'm able to keep my Amazon rights, streaming to Amazon rights myself, and then they pretty much have every other platform. So it's pretty much a non-exclusive deal, but now they're kind of getting finicky as far as like what platforms you're able to actually distribute on. But overall, it's pretty much a non-exclusive agreement. Whereas if you're going to work with a distributor, say like a traditional distributor, so let's just say this is an extreme example, but Disney, right? So if Disney's like, we want to distribute your film, but we want exclusive rights to every type of platform, theatrical, streaming, cable, etc., right? You can't take your film to another distributor and be like, hey, can you sell off these rights elsewhere? They want the whole pie, right? So that's kind of the difference there. So as I explained, exclusive rights, the distributor has sole distribution control in the specified region. You can't license or sell your film to any other distributor or platform in that territory. And this is pretty common with traditional distribution deals, right? So the pros of this, more marketing effort up front, so they have more incentive to promote your film. They're going to put a lot more marketing dollars behind it, which is not always the case. But, if you're working like with a major distributor, that's usually going to be the case. You don't have to do as much work on your own. You get bigger upfront payments, so potential for a minimum guarantee or a higher licensing fee, which means you're just going to see a lot more money in the long run. The cons is that you obviously have a lot less flexibility and you lose the ability to negotiate with other distributors in that region. And then long-term lock-ins, so some exclusive deals can be 7 to 15 years, which is very, very common. So you just won't be able to, if you're unhappy with your deal, you're not really, unless there's a clause in your contract that says you can cancel at any time or whatever, you're locked in for 7 to 15 years on, whatever that deal is. So you can't take your film anywhere else for that time period, right? Whereas non-exclusive, you retain the ability to license your film to multiple distributors or platforms in the same territory, and more common with self-distribution or aggregator services, which we'll get into more later. So the pros here, obviously great flexibility. You can work with multiple distributors, maximizing your reach. You have diversified income streams, earning different money from platforms or regions simultaneously. But the cons here, less just distributor commitment. So they're going to put less effort into marketing your film. So that's going to be more on you. And, market saturation. So your film could appear on too many platforms, although I don't know if there's really such thing as too many platforms, because like I said, you just don't know where your audience is going to land, but it can make it feel less exclusive if that is important to you. So let's go ahead and break down real quick the different revenue models when it comes to streaming. So with streaming, you're going to have 3 different options. You're going to have TVOD, SVOD, and AVOD. So TVOD, or transactional video on demand, which basically means pay-per-view or rental-based streaming. Your audience pays per rental or purchase. An example of this is if your film is on Amazon, for an example, your consumer will be able to buy or rent your film, right? This works best for filmmakers who have strong niche audiences who are willing to buy or rent that film. So think like your horror movie fans, or maybe, like Christian-based or faith-based movie fans, they're more likely to kind of go out of their way to buy or rent your film instead of expecting it to be on streaming. And then with revenue, you usually keep a percentage after each sale after the platform's cut. So for an example, if you're streaming directly on Amazon, which really isn't a thing anymore, but I know there are some people like myself still out there. If somebody rents my film, I will get 50% of that revenue, right? So if somebody rents it for $3, I'll make $1.50 of that. Now that's pretty much the case with everywhere else. It's typically about 30%. You can expect typically about 30 to 50% depending on the platform. And then we have SVOD, subscription video on demand. So I'm sure everybody's really familiar with this one. It says flat fee subscriptions like Netflix, Hulu, and Disney Plus. But if you're working with a small distributor and an aggregator, you're probably not going to get a flat fee unless you just, strike an amazing deal. But viewers pay a monthly fee for an unlimited access. So Netflix is obviously the primary example here. You pay, I think it's like $22 now a month for Netflix, and then you would get a percentage of that typically. But they also can offer flat fees up front. That's a lot more common with bigger movies, but that requires a licensing deal. So you won't get paid per view, but you'll get an upfront payment for a set number of times. So let's just say, for an example, Netflix is like, we're going to license your movie for X number of dollars, and this term is going to last for 3 years or something like that. So they'll pay this amount of money for your film for that amount of time. Once that time is up, you can, if they want to continue to play your film, you can renegotiate your terms. But for smaller subscription video on demand platforms, you're usually just getting a percentage of the subscription fee that people pay. So you're not going to make very much with this method. So for an example, like with Film Hub, I'm on several subscription video on demand platforms, and I don't make very much there. Like I make next to nothing. So honestly, it's not a great platform for like if you're making like a no budget film, or maybe even, something under $100,000, just because like unless you just get that upfront deal, it's just not going to happen. You got to have talent behind it, or won some major award or something. I don't know, because I've never been in this position, right? So it's not great for smaller filmmakers, but like I said, it is great if you can get that fee, to get on the platform. But it's pretty uncommon for filmmakers, at least at the level that I'm making films at. And then we have AVOD, which is currently my favorite way of making money with my movie right now. Ad-supported video on demand. So basically, these streaming platforms are free to watch on, but supported by ads. So you can think YouTube, Tubi, Roku channel, etc., where you just, I don't even think you have to sign up for an account. You can just go straight to the streaming platform, play the movie, and then you will get paid based on how many ads are put in front of that movie. So like I said, viewers don't pay anything. The ads generate the revenue. This works great for filmmakers who want exposure and long-term revenue streams. You get to share the ad revenue based on views. It's less money than TVOD or SVOD if you're getting a streaming deal or a licensing deal on SVOD, but it's easier to access large audiences. So, the Tubi boom that's been happening over the last couple of years, that's how a lot of people are generating a lot of revenue, just because, a lot of people don't want to pay for streaming services anymore. And just, it's easier just to suck it up and watch ads, I guess, for a lot of these films. The way that they generate, or the way that they kind of calculate how much you make, is you'll make what's called a CPM, which stands for cost per milli. So for YouTube, for an example, like on these videos, I will get paid a certain ad rate based on every 1,000 views. So for an example, I would say my average rate is probably like $5 or something like that per 1,000 views. So every 1,000 views that I get, I will make that $5, right? Something along those lines. I don't know how Tubi's works 100%, but it's got to be something in that realm. So you'll get paid based on how many ads are shown and how many views you have, and that sort of thing. Basically, you need a lot of views to make money with this method. So marketing is definitely key here. So, just to kind of sum this up really quick, which one is best if you have an audience that's willing to pay? And this is typically how streamers will start to, like, you'll notice as I kind of talk about these things, like, pay attention to how movies show up on your different streaming platforms. So, for an example, I have, like HBO Max, I have Netflix, I have Disney Plus and Hulu, and I have Amazon Prime. But I also, like rent films through like Vudu or Amazon. Pay attention to how, the process in which the films come out. So you'll have your theatrical movie, and then once theatrical is done, you'll see it come up on SVOD. So you'll be able to buy or rent it on like Vudu or Amazon or somewhere else that, let you buy or rent new release films, right? And then after a certain period of time, you'll see those films show up on streaming. So like for an example, a movie I watched recently that I kind of saw this progress with was the movie Heretic, the Hugh Grant horror movie. So that movie came out on theaters, and then it was available for purchase or rental, which is how I ended up watching the film. I missed it in theaters just because apparently nobody went to see it because it was in my movie theater for like a week or so. So I didn't even get the chance to watch it. And then like, I'd say a couple weeks after I watched it, from renting it, it showed up on HBO Max. So it went from theatrical to TVOD to SVOD. And then at some point when the streaming revenue kind of runs out, they'll probably put it out on AVOD, right? So you might see it pop up on a Tubi or somewhere else, right? But AVOD is typically like way down the line for Hollywood features. But, it could be a lot more common to do that sooner with smaller features. If you can get a streamer to pay a licensing fee, I mean, SVOD is definitely a great method too. I wouldn't expect a big payday with this method, but it is certainly great. And this is another thing, you can negotiate too, is that streamer going to be the exclusive platform that can pay your movie? Well, that can play your movie. So they're going to have to pay a lot more money up front, right? Whereas if you're doing a non-exclusive deal, maybe they want to pay a little bit less, but you can take that movie and, stream it somewhere else as well, right? So that's a great way to rack up, multiple different revenue streams if you're going that route. Or like I said, if somebody wants to be exclusive, well, if they want to be exclusive means more dollars, right? Which is really nice. And if you have gotten this kind of deal before, I would love to talk to you. So definitely reach out to me if you've ever gotten like a SVOD streaming deal. I would love to learn more about that. If you want passive income and exposure, AVOD, which again, for somebody at my budget level, it makes the most sense. AVOD just makes the most sense. So I'm definitely a lover of AVOD right now. Tubi's obviously paid me a lot of money on my movie, and it continues to be. It's not the best revenue stream for me right now. I mean, it is my best revenue stream right now. It's really my only one. But, it was paying more about a year ago. It's still doing pretty okay now. Like it's still like, it's not making like pennies. I think like right now this month it's made like $100 or something. So it's not the most money, but it's definitely, not nothing too, right? So now let's get into understanding territory rights, right? So territory rights refer to the geographical regions where a distributor has all the rights to sell, stream, and exhibit your film. You sign a distribution deal. You're granting the distributor the exclusive or non-exclusive license to distribute your film in specific regions or countries. Territory rights can specifically impact your film's revenue potential, as different regions have different market values and distribution opportunities. It's pretty much going to work exactly the same as how I talked about before. You're going to have your theatrical, you'll have your streaming, cable, obviously not international because we're talking about international, and then your physical, right? So you have your domestic rights, which was going to cover your home country. So for a US based filmmaker like myself, that's typically going to be the United States and Canada, or North America, just for easier reference. They typically refer to it as North America. And then that may include platforms like Prime, Apple TV, Hulu, that cater to a domestic audience. So your platform, it could depend on, your region too. And then your revenue potential, the US is a major market, but obviously competition is fierce. And then domestic distribution is obviously more accessible for independent films. Then you have your international, so covers distribution outside of your home country. often sold as a regional package. So as I mentioned previously, North America is typically the US and Canada. Then you could have Europe, which would be like the Western, Eastern, and other specific countries, Asia Pacific, China, Japan, Australia, etc., Latin America, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, etc. And actually, like with Film Hub, you can actually break this down by country if you really, really want to get that specific. I don't really recommend doing that, but you absolutely could. So that's one of the benefits of Film Hub is you can get hyper specific on which territories you want to or not distribute to, which is really nice. Whereas, if you're working with like a traditional distributor, you're kind of just signing away everything, right? And then your revenue potential, some regions like Europe or Asia can be very lucrative for niche or genre films, but it does require some localized marketing and subtitling, or honestly, even dubbing. So localizing would be, like changing some things up in the film, specifically dubbing, so changing the language. But sometimes Hollywood features will actually change like parts of the script or the way it's edited to fit the audience of a specific country. This is very common for distributing films out in China. So you may go see Avengers in the United States and it could be a little bit different if you go watch it in China, right? You're probably not going to have that happen with a film at our size, but it's not completely uncommon either. And then, of course, you have your simple worldwide rights, which is where the distributor acquires the rights to distribute your film globally. This is common for larger distributors that have networks in multiple regions. And then your revenue potential is obviously it can lead to broader exposure, but you'll likely receive a smaller share of the profits due to large scale distribution. And then the risk of losing control over certain region is if the distributor doesn't actively promote your film. If you are looking to be completely hands off in the distribution process, or just trying to keep it as simple as possible, this is going to be your best bet. But if you are a little more targeted and you have the resources to kind of target specific regions, then obviously it makes sense to kind of, just do things off on your own. But honestly, this is what I did worldwide. Just keep it simple. And then, of course, I won't go over this again. You can read the slide if you really want to, but then you got your exclusive and non-exclusive territory rights, right? So it's not going to work any different than, what I talked about before with the domestic, non-exclusive, and exclusive, but you can do this for each region too. So let's talk briefly about how territory rights can impact your distribution deal. So the revenue splits could be different by region. So some distributors offer different revenue splits depending on the territory. An example would be like 70-30, 70 to you, 30 to the distributor in North America, but a 60-40 split in Europe. You could have territory-specific platforms, so certain streaming services or TV networks can only operate in specific regions. An example, Sky TV in the UK, Canal Plus in France, or Foxtel in Australia. Regional marketing requirements. As I had mentioned before, distributors may require localized marketing materials such as translated posters, trailers, and subtitles. And then the territory windows, some distributors could request staggered releases across territories. So for an example, they may want to start a North America release earlier in the year. So on the example on the slide, starting that in January 2025, and then later, a couple months later, releasing it in Europe, and then later in the year in the Asia Pacific markets. So here's a couple tips for negotiating your territory rights if you want to do that, right? Or maybe there's part of the deal that you don't necessarily like. But like I said, if you're looking just to keep things simple, then just, whatever they give you is whatever they give you, right? But do your research what regions are most profitable for your genre. So if you are making a horror film, maybe horror films are not, super popular in, one market. So it doesn't make sense to distribute in that market, right? But it's really popular in this other market. So you want to get a great deal in that market. So make sure you're researching these things if that's important to you. So horror films often perform well in Europe and Asia. Documentaries may have more success in North America, in the UK, especially depending on the topic. So maybe some topics just don't play well in other foreign markets, whereas some others will play very well in others. So just something to keep in mind there. And then retain the rights to regions you can distribute yourself. So if you want to, just do domestic. That's completely okay if that's, okay with the distributor. But if you plan to self-distribute it in certain regions, negotiate to retain those rights. An example, you sell the North American rights to a distributor, but keep the international rights to sell directly. Beware of long-term exclusivity. So some distributors lock in filmmakers for long-term, for exclusive territory deals. Like I mentioned before, it could be very long, like something like this on my slide says 10 to 15 years, but it could be 7. I mean, I've seen deals up to 30 years. So just keep that in mind. Always negotiate for a reasonable contract length. 3 to 7 years is definitely a lot more standard. If they're getting up there beyond the 7 years, that's when things get a little sketchy, unless they're just a great partner to work with. But honestly, like if they were a great partner to work with, they'd have better terms in their contracts, right? Negotiate the revenue splits by territory. Don't accept a blanket revenue split across all territories. So do your research, see what makes the most sense. Ask for higher revenue percentages in regions where you expect better performance. So if one region like North America performs really well and it's like, we'll give you a 70-30 split, but there's another region, they're like, we'll do a 50-50, but you're like, I know this region's going to do very well. See if you can bump that up to 60-40, 70-30 like in your North America. So to kind of wrap this up, some key takeaways. Territory rights define where your film can be distributed and who controls it. You can sell domestic, international, and worldwide rights depending on your deal. Exclusive rights offer more marketing potential but limit your flexibility, while non-exclusive rights provide a lot more freedom to you. Carefully negotiate revenue splits and contract lengths by region, or just honestly in general. Retain control of certain territories if you plan to self-distribute or seek multiple deals. Make things simple, or like I said before, just make things simple for yourself and just sign all of your rights away. And then a final pro tip when negotiating, clarify which regions are included, which should be in your contract, but make sure you ask specifically. Some distributors may claim broad territories, but only actively distribute in a few, and ask for detailed reporting on which regions your film are actively being sold in. And that wraps up this video in my film distribution series. If you found this video helpful, definitely be sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video so that way it can reach more people who may need it. And if you want to help me out directly, my feature film Cashing Out will be linked in the description if you would like to check that out. And of course, I will have a couple videos linked on screen here. The next video should be linked on here by the time it comes out, or the entire video that this is a part of will be linked on screen as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.